Chief, just to clarify a couple of things you've said publicly already. There was a shooting in the Shaw neighborhood that is still under investigation with Mr. Myers involving a police officer, and that is something that you've said before, and I assume it holds true tonight. You can't talk about while it's under investigation.
Right. It's still going on the investigative process, and when we're done, we're going to hand that investigation to the circuit attorney. After she has a chance to look at it, then everything that we can under the Sunshine Law we'll talk about.
And I do want to talk big picture with you, but we've got you here, and it would be wrong if I didn't ask you what a lot of people are, I think, asking themselves and asking us when we're out in the community, and that is they're worried about what might happen when the grand jury announces its decision, whatever that might be. What can you tell people about how things might go from your perspective?
What I can tell them is there are a lot of conversations going on between law enforcement and demonstrators to make sure that everybody has the right to express their First Amendment rights, that they can do so unimpeded as long as they obey the law. And we're asking that people come out and do that, but do it peacefully. So what I would tell people is that we're preparing, just as you would expect anybody to prepare. Law enforcement has to prepare for what could come. But it's not just preparing, it's about conversation, and it's about preparing the community and preparing the people that protest. There are meetings going on every day trying to find solutions, trying to find common ground, and trying to work. The narrative that started with the death of Michael Brown in Ferguson is still being written, and we have an ability still to impact that narrative and turn it into something positive. You talked about body cameras, talked about civilian review. A lot of things are in the conversation.
Are you worried?
I'm always worried. I think any police chief that you ask, are they worried? I worry every day about everything. I worry about violence in our community. Community on community violence. I worry about officer-involved shootings. I worry about the protest. So I am, but what I do know is that the men and women of the police department and the community members can find common ground and they can work together. I think it's also important to note that in this civil disobedience, in these protests that have happened, nobody on the law enforcement has been seriously injured because of any act of a protester, and nobody that's been protesting has been seriously injured before because of law enforcement activities. I think that's tremendous considering the amount of time that we've covered. So we both have done a lot to make sure that everybody's safe.
Have the past 2.5 months or so changed your department, changed your policies in any way?
I think Dr. Klinger was absolutely right. Law enforcement, it was a watershed event. We are shaping what law enforcement is going to look like for generations. Open and transparent, body cameras, civilian review, all of those things are in conversation in a way they haven't been before. Just an example inside of our department, we formed a force investigative unit to look at officer-involved shootings in a different way with the help of Dr. Klinger, who's been a big advocate of this type of in-depth look at them. That's the model. So the narrative for law enforcement, the conversation for law enforcement, St. Louis, the St. Louis region, is shaping what law enforcement will look like for the country in the coming years.
Do people understand your business? Is there a breakdown there in the relationship between the police and the community when it comes to the things we've already discussed about how things can escalate or elevate to different uses of different amounts of force?
I think you had two questions there. Do people understand our business? I think the media, television, movies, a variety of things have made law enforcement, I call it the CSI effect, that we can do DNA, forensics, autopsies, toxicologies in 40 minutes with 3 commercial breaks. That's just not the reality. They're called investigations because they take a long time to get through all of the facts, to interview people multiple times, to recanvass. So I don't know if people understand really the complexity and the hands-on work that has to happen with that. And with the community, I think that we always have an opportunity to grow. I think we are doing a better job of it. Just an example, I took the command staff of the city department through implicit bias training just last week. We're going to Department of Justice training. So I'm trying to educate the department and the command structure on the new way to do business, and I hope the community realizes that. At the shooting of Michael Brown, what that was about is not what happened that day, but it's what happened in generations before. That the relationship with the community didn't overnight just go like this. What was we saw systemic failures of government, under service, under education, under employment. Law enforcement in a lot of communities became the face of government. So we are overcoming a lot of that. Do we have room to grow? Absolutely, 100%. Do we have a lot of work to do? Sure we do. But this was a wake-up call, that watershed event. We're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I've gotten the sense that people feel, especially in an officer-involved deadly shooting, that the police, this is the community's feeling, that the police and the prosecutors as well kind of protect their own. Do you feel that? How do you answer that?
I think you have to look at the individual agency. I think you alluded to it a little bit. Each agency is different. And in an agency of 1,300 police officers, I believe we're professional. I believe that we do thorough investigations. We're open, we're transparent. So much to the point that we're taking this investigation and giving it to an independent third party to review. I work for the mayor of the city of St. Louis. I work for the people of the city of St. Louis. The prosecutor in St. Louis is elected by the people of St. Louis. They have to have confidence in the people that they elect. I haven't heard one comment about the circuit attorney's office not being objective in this case. While people question us, that's why we hand the report over. And in this case, even the U.S. attorney is going to take a look at it.
Are these common steps or are these extraordinary measures?
Both common and extraordinary. Common in the sense that many major police agencies have something akin to what the chief is talking about. And some places around the country have had this for a long time. Other agencies don't do the thorough type of investigation in terms of handing it over to another body for review. But that is the gold standard, an in-depth review, in-depth investigation by law enforcement that is then handed over to a prosecutor for review. Some places it goes always to a grand jury. It's fascinating to me that people are complaining that the Mike Brown case went to a grand jury, should have been done some other way. This is pro forma in many places because that way members of the community get to participate in the review. Other places what happens is it is either a circuit attorney or a state's attorney or a district attorney that has his or her underlings take a careful look, then make a recommendation to the prosecutor, then the prosecutor's office will issue a letter talking about why the shooting was either appropriate or inappropriate.
Can you help us understand the policy that we talked about earlier? We have the U.S. Constitution, the Missouri Constitution, and then the individual policy of a department on deadly force. Can you walk us through that a little bit more?
Sure. I believe we have a policy that's probably a little more restrictive, but certainly in line with other agencies around the country. We're allowed to use deadly force only in the apprehension of a serious felon where violence was used or the threat of violence was used to protect our lives or to protect the lives of others. We do not shoot at fleeing cars. We do not use deadly force for protecting property. A burglary, for example, a larceny from a vehicle, we do not use deadly force. So we have a policy that I would say is more on the restrictive side, but certainly in line with agencies around the country.
What do you need from the community?
I need partners. When we talk about, we're talking about officer-involved shooting now, but let's talk about crime. I need community members to stand with us, to go to the circuit attorney's office to say, let's issue charges on this, to go to the courts and stand in front of a judge and say, this person has terrorized our neighborhood. Law enforcement is a community effort. We get our empowerment from the community. If we don't have the community support, we can't do our job. So we are not an occupying force. We are there to support the community and to keep the community safe, but they have to stand side by side with us. If they don't, one leg of the stool falls and we all fail.
I know you talk about community policing. What does that really mean?
Yeah, community policing, and
does it mean different things to different departments? Or?
Well, and that's the unfortunate part, it does. But in ours, it's making that connection. It's doing the neighborhood ownership model, where we organize neighborhoods into being able to do neighborhood watches. We do court watch programs. We do problem properties, and we talked while we were waiting here about a residence that was a habitual problem on the street. Law enforcement along with the community got together to solve that problem. I now require our recruits to come out of the academy to spend 30 days walking foot beats so they get to know people in their beats, get to know people in their neighborhoods. We've become a society where everybody likes to tweet and text, and even people in the neighborhood say they don't know who lives on either side of them. We have to get back to that sense of community. Community policing is also a neighborhood policing itself. When we grew up, if I did something wrong, which, believe it or not, happened occasionally, the neighbors would grab me by the ear and walk me to my mom and say, look what little Sammy did. And there was a neighborhood accountability around that. Now, we don't see that. So community policing is about our interaction with the community's interaction with us, and the community's interaction with itself.
You mentioned recruits. Is it important to you that your recruits look like the people they are serving when it comes to the diversity, and what are you doing about that?
Absolutely. So we started an academy class at the beginning of October. Over 50% African American. We graduated a class at the end of August, over 50% African American. We've drawn a 6-hour circle around St. Louis and have gone to universities with high African American enrollments and done recruiting in those, Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Truman, a variety of universities. So I do believe that our department should be reflective of the community that we serve, and we're committed to doing that. And the last classes, you've seen that commitment.